Welcome on into the Cougar Tracks podcast, powered by KSLSports.com. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper, coming to you from Newark, New Jersey. That's right, here on the East Coast, the site of the East Regional Semifinals, more commonly known as the NCAA Tournament Sweet 16. It's late here on the East Coast. I got to say, the 2 time zone travel, it does wear you down. It really does. So this podcast is not going to be as long as some of the other ones, but I did want to get a podcast in before I go to bed and get ready for a busy Wednesday, which will consist of locker room, a little bit of observation during the practice period, press conferences. It's going to be a busy day as BYU gets ready to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide, number 2 seed versus the number 6 seed in the East Region. BYU arrived in Newark, New Jersey around 8:30 or so here local time. It was a little bit of a long flight for BYU because they had a delay. They had a little bit of a delay, a 1-hour delay, so it took a little bit longer than expected for BYU to get out here. And what's interesting is that Wednesday, they are the first team to go through practice. They don't have the afternoon period, so they're going to have to be up and at it early, right away, after 2 time zone travels. So not much time to adjust to the body clock and get ready, but obviously Thursday night's what matters the most, and that's going to be a tip-off at 5:09 Mountain Time, 7:09 p.m. Eastern Time. We will have extended pregame beginning at 3 o'clock on KSL News Radio, but this BYU and Alabama matchup is going to be a fun one. You know, a lot of people have been talking about how this is going to be, first to 100. I don't know if it's going to get to that level. It's still an NCAA tournament game, and I think BYU's defense is better than people give them credit for. I don't think they're an elite defense by any stretch, but still, these teams can be somewhat capable. Alabama's faced one of the toughest schedules in college basketball, if not the toughest. So you factor in, what they've given up. They've faced some really good opposition. It's not like they're giving up big points to scrubs. They're giving up points to some of the best teams in the land, but then you watch how they performed against Robert Morris. They're giving up 81 to Robert Morris, and even in the first half against St. Mary's, and really throughout that game, St. Mary's was getting looks. They just couldn't knock them down, and the Gales still scored 66 points by their standards. That's feels like a pretty decent clip for the Gales who play at a much slower pace. So, yes, this is going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be up and down. I think this is going to be an incredibly high-level basketball game. Both teams, such high-powered offenses, but I do think these defenses are a little bit more capable than people think, but who wouldn't be opposed to seeing maybe a 104 to 102 NCAA Tournament Sweet 16 game? It could be a lot of fun, that's for sure. I'm really intrigued to see some of the defensive matchups, how BYU lines up against some of Alabama's personnel. You look at their roster, they've got bucket getters up and down that roster. They've got 7 different guys that at some point this season have posted season highs, individual season highs of more than 20 points or more. Alabama had 6 guys in double figures in their win over St. Mary's. They're incredibly balanced. Their tempo is off the charts. Arizona is elite in tempo. I think Alabama is even another gear, another level compared to Arizona. This is going to be such a unique challenge for BYU, and I would say Alabama probably the second best team BYU will face to date this season, only behind Houston. Alabama is an incredibly talented team, but I'm really curious to see some of the matchups. Of course, Alabama has the consensus All-American guard in Mark Sears, 6'1", 190 pounds, a former Ohio Bobcat. That's always one of the great things about this NCAA tournament now is seeing the path to getting to this point of stardom at the power conference level. Mark Sears is a household name for college basketball junkies. He started out at Ohio. Grant Nilsson, he got back into the starting lineup in the St. Mary's game. He's a former North Dakota State transfer. He got banged up in the SEC tournament, and there were some questions. How banged up is he? He was limited against Robert Morris, didn't start in that game, but he was back in the starting lineup and did a really nice job. And then they've got a heralded freshman who was one of a handful of guys in their number 2 overall recruiting class for the class of 2024. LeBaron Philon, all SEC freshman team, 6'4", 177 pounds, combo guard, shooting guard for Alabama. They've got some great talent on their starting lineup and in their rotation. This is going to be an excellent matchup. Just to see, again, the chess match between Nate Oates and Kevin Young. And Nate Oates, after the St. Mary's game, had some complimentary words for Kevin Young, said he's followed him. I just think that these are two coaches that are both a little bit ahead of the trends in basketball. These are very forward-thinking individuals when it comes to the game. So to see how both of these guys attack this matchup out here on the East Coast, I'm fascinated to see how this plays out and really hear from both of these teams heading into this matchup. It's going to be an excellent game between BYU and Alabama. And, I'm really curious, too, to see if BYU, they can get off to a strong start. Again, I talk about that quite a bit, but I feel like it's key in this one, too, because sometimes in these high-powered offensive games, does someone really catch fire offensively and pull away? If someone has a brief lull, does that allow the other team to go off on a 8-10-0 run, and you just never can catch up and dig yourself in a hole because that other team is so good offensively? Wisconsin was brilliant offensively against BYU in the second half. They were outstanding. BYU was just that much better, and Wisconsin really couldn't make up any ground until the last 2:30. That's why I feel like, again, a strong start for BYU in this one will be critical to really set the tone, settle in against Alabama, because, you could get to the 17-minute mark and Bama's already got 10 points, and if you stumble out of the gates, miss a few shots or have a turnover or two, that could be problematic against an offense like this with Alabama, who's got so much pace. But, like Wisconsin, not a defense that generates a lot of turnovers. They're 352nd nationally. Alabama is in turnover percentage, so that's typically a good sign. Think about what Yegor did in the Wisconsin game. He had an 8-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio against a guard line that was not pressuring him like he experienced in so many games like VCU, Houston, Iowa State, West Virginia. So that's a promising thing here, too, when it comes to this matchup. And I don't feel like it's a game where BYU is going to turn the ball over. At least they shouldn't. That's just not the MO of Alabama. Now, if they have poor passes, poor mistakes, self-inflicted, that turnover number could be problematic for BYU. And Alabama is the type of team that can really capitalize. But it's going to be a really good game. And I think that this is a huge stage for BYU. For Alabama, they're used to this. They've been here year after year. Now, Nate Oates has really reinvented what you think of Alabama basketball. I remember years ago when Alabama came out to Salt Lake at the Huntsman Center. I think it was like 2002. They were the number 1 team in the country. And maybe it was the year after. I can't remember, but I feel like they went to the NIT. They didn't even go to the NCAA tournament. They bowed out. They just faded. And that's kind of what Alabama basketball has been. They've had moments, but never sustained success. Nate Oates is now making them a powerhouse. And what I like, too, is that, Oates, as I noted, Oates and Young are very forward-thinking coaches. Nate Oates, Noah's Ark, that's something that BYU incorporated when Mark Pope was the head coach at BYU. That's in the Marriott Center Annex. Just these forward-thinking things that are advanced analytics, give you an upper hand, really dive into the pace, the tempo. I think it's just a fascinating matchup. Another area that I'm really intrigued to see how BYU performs is on the glass. BYU is 68th nationally in offensive rebound percentage, 31st nationally on the defensive glass, percentages on Ken Palm's ratings. Alabama, 160th on defense. BYU, if they can have success in the glass and get second and third opportunities, that's going to be significant too, because just naturally that's going to take away time from Alabama, increasing the volume of the possessions and taking chances away from them and getting an upper hand on the sheer number of field goal attempts that you have compared to Alabama. It almost feels like it's a game of a math equation where these two coaches think so analytically and they trust their schemes, they trust their sets, that sometimes it might just come down to a math equation. And if you can get more shot attempts than the other team, that might help the cause as well. But BYU, again, they've got to take care of the basketball. Yegor Demon, Dallin Hall, they've got to be strong with the basketball. I've really liked what I've seen from Yegor Demon in this NCAA tournament. He looks like a lottery pick. You're seeing the potential, the flashes, the brilliance from Yegor, and that flair, that ability that he has. You're seeing that on full display in the biggest stage in college basketball. And that's promising, too, that the stage is not getting to him. But the talent and the competition is heightening up. I mean, it's going to a whole nother level this weekend with the potential of Alabama and then waiting for you maybe Duke. I would assume it's going to be Duke if you can get past Alabama, which is going to be a tall order. Maybe it's Arizona, too, which is a big level, high-level team, too. This is going to be an incredible weekend for BYU if they can somehow find a way to get by Alabama, because the level of competition that Yegor is going to face, this team's going to face, this is big-time college basketball, and this is the biggest stage. And I love that BYU is in a Sweet 16 field where it's all power conference brands, and the programs that are committing the resources, they're the ones thriving. I just think it's a cool storyline that BYU is in the Sweet 16 in a year where everyone's saying, oh, it's just only power conference teams. It shows how committed BYU is to winning at the highest levels of college basketball, because this field has been very chalky. BYU is one of the few Cinderellas, if you want to call them that. I don't think they're a Cinderella with their history and their track record, but seed-wise, they and Ole Miss and Arkansas could be viewed as the Cinderellas or the dark horses in this remaining NCAA tournament field. But I think it's fun for BYU to be in this moment and this opportunity, and they should play loose. They should embrace the opportunity to be an underdog, and they fared well throughout this season in that space. So embrace it. Play loose. Play to your potential. And if BYU does, if they play to their ability that we know they can, I think BYU's going to have a chance to pull this upset. It's just this level of tempo that I'm expecting to see from Alabama, I just don't think BYU's seen all year, even compared to Arizona, which is an incredibly high-paced team. But I think this is a whole nother level, and even Wisconsin, too. Alabama's the number one scoring offense in college basketball. They are a high-powered juggernaut offense that's been doing it for a handful of years now under Nate Oates. It's going to be an incredible challenge for BYU to see what they can do to slow this down and try to find a way to get a victory and go blow for blow too, because BYU's offense is dang good as well. They've been brilliant since February in the calendar. They've been one of the best offenses in college basketball this season. But we're going to have a bunch of coverage from here in Newark. Wednesday, you're going to have locker room sound. You're going to hear from the players, the coaches. It's going to be outstanding stuff. Going to have a bunch of content up on KSLSports.com, the KSL Sports YouTube page, Instagram, X, and of course on the KSL Sports app as well, which I highly recommend you downloading so you can get push notifications and other alerts about BYU and all my stories that I send on the website throughout the week. So go check that out and subscribe to this podcast. Leave a 5-star rating and a review, and I will talk to you next time here on the Cougar Tracks podcast from Newark, New Jersey on KSLSports.com.